The Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Strip and Flip selection, as opposed to election, of 2016, 5 Jim Crows and Electronic Election Theft by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman. This is from the chapter Part 1, page 15, Strip. The foundation of election theft is the manipulation of race as a divide and conquer strategy. It began with the first Jim Crow chattel slavery. Slavery in various forms has existed since the dawn of time, but in the colonies of British North America and then in the United States, it took on a uniquely virulent incarnation. Chattel slavery was, of course, a horrific, brutal labor system designed primarily in the American South to power a network of plantations that produced cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, and other hot weather crops that could be grown in large fields. But it had a larger purpose here. Our peculiar institution, how the founders referred to slavery, was meant to divide black laborers from white in a caste system that would guarantee that they would never unite in rebellion. As we'll see, this originated with the infamous Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 in Virginia, in which indentured servants of both races joined forces. Plantation owners vowed to make sure that that never happened again. When the United States became an independent country, plantation owners also vowed to secure political benefits from their slaves. Thus, they wrote into the Constitution the 3/5 clause that gave slave owners additional representation for their slaves, even though those slaves could not vote. That additional vote count guaranteed that every president from Jefferson to Lincoln either owned slaves or his vice president did, and that the Congress was strongly controlled by slave owners right up to the outbreak of the Civil War. After the Civil War, with formal slavery abolished, a Jim Crow system of racial segregation overtook the South. Enforced by the Democratic Party and its Ku Klux Klan terror wing, white landowners updated the realities of slavery to again keep blacks and whites apart. The roots of racism since 1865 has been the treatment of legally freed African Americans as something less than human, guaranteeing all whites a sense of superiority and an economic leg up. When the populist and socialist movements that campaigned most powerfully from the 1880s to the 1920s worked to overcome this separation, they were hammered by the court and electoral systems through a series of stolen elections and twisted race-based legal decisions, and the fusion of the Democratic and Republican parties in the 1917 municipal races in the Northeast. Confirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1890s, this updated Jim Crow caste system again guaranteed that blacks in the South and parts of the North would not be allowed to vote, and that they would be carefully divided from whites by caste as well as class. Since 1970, the primary weapon for suppressing the minority vote has been the third Jim Crow, the drug war. In the tradition of Bacon's Rebellion and the populist socialist upheavals, blacks and whites once again began to unite during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1950s and 60s. In response, Richard Nixon's Republican Party invoked the divide and conquer war on drugs. Confronted with the liberalization of the Southern Democratic Party, Nixon feared that black votes might remake America's political map. In Republican eyes, there was only one solution: disenfranchise the African American population, along with young and Latino voters who were leaning strongly to the left. In 1972, Nixon pointedly ignored a powerful report from his own Blue Ribbon Schaefer Commission on drug use and escalated the attack on marijuana and other drugs. In the 45 years since, a staggering 41 million Americans have been arrested for pot or other controlled substances. That's a number of human beings that exceeds the populations of more than 150 other countries worldwide. It has left the United States with the largest prison population in the history of the modern world, while having little or no impact on the actual use of drugs. As Michelle Alexander has shown in her landmark book, The New Jim Crow, the majority of those incarcerated have been black and Latino, with a devastating impact on our elections. Millions of these mostly young, mostly male citizens have been stripped of their right to vote, as well as their ability to maintain families, obtain work, and meaningfully participate in the political lives of their communities. All this has been by design. Once again, a new Jim Crow policy has been delegated by a ruling elite to strip our non-white population of its ability to exercise its fair share of power in our electoral process and to unite with whites in political action. In the 1890s, rising industrial interests committed the nation to a fourth Jim Crow, a course of race-based global empire. The U.S. already had a history of foreign intervention, dating to Thomas Jefferson's 1803 use of our fledgling Navy to fight pirates along the coast, the shores of Tripoli, of what's now called Libya. That was followed by the conquest of the North American continent with genocidal warfare used against the indigenous peoples who had lived here for 20,000 years. By the 1890s, when the frontier consumed, America's giant corporations began to expand overseas. They started with Hawaii, a constitutional monarchy, and then pushed into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and beyond. And in all cases, these interventions involved the white-ruled U.S. interfering with the political systems of non-white countries. In discussing this fourth Jim Crow, we include an extensive, though not complete, list of these interventions. It underscores the reality that our own political system has become an imperial juggernaut, with the inevitable blowback bound to obliterate any residual pretense to real democracy at home. Generally, there's been an attempt to portray these interventions as benign, meant to bring democracy, progress, and the Christian faith to third world nations. In fact, they've been largely economic in purpose, a dollar democracy to grab other people's resources. The Strip and Flip selection of 2016 by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman.